You're listening to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans.
You just got to go out and express yourself.
Fonte with a scooping header.
You just got to get the job done. I'm here to get the job done.
Подача, Остин все-таки забил.
It's infield to Mane, 25 yards out. Lovely ball for Dell. Onside, 1-0. Buffon shot. Oh my word.
Unbelievable. He ran around the pitch like Bambi on ice. Really very, very embarrassing to watch.
And now, your host, Matt Markstone. Hello and welcome to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans. My name is Matt Markstone. I'm the host of the show. No matter where you are, no matter how you may be listening, thank you for making the show a part of your day. If you're brand new to the show, welcome. I hope that you're having a good day. If you've been here a long time, also welcome. Welcome back. If you're new to the show and you want to be welcomed back next week, make sure you subscribe to the feed wherever you listen to podcasts. There are links on the website to make that easy. And if you have trouble, drop me a message and I will help you out. So this week on the show, the season is getting closer. We're just 2 friendlies away from actually playing against Burnley. I'm getting more and more excited as the days go by. And I know that my guest this week, Chris Huskins, is also gearing up for the season. But we spoke on Friday before the 2-0 win over Dijon, but it wasn't streamed. So if you're looking for highlights and analysis and all that stuff, you won't find it on this podcast, but it's one more friendly with limited kind of access. So enjoy the highlights that are on the website or on the Twitter accounts or whatever. That's basically all we know. And it sounded like everybody played just fine. We'll see, as the guys will have 2 friendlies coming up during the week against Celta Vigo and Borussia Mönchengladbach. So we won't really dive into that. But with Chris, he's a lifelong Southampton fan. He's born in Southampton, lived there most of his life. And he's somebody that I respect a lot professionally. Chris works with podcasts. He's a digital marketer, a bunch of other things like that. But he is someone that I've found, I don't even know how really, but I've asked questions of him about the podcast, about how to make it better. And I've worked with him and I'm a member of his newly launched website, podtips.pro. So just have that in mind. And so this week, as it goes, I have a guy who's a Southampton fan who I respect very much, who does podcasting for a living. And I have maybe the worst audio that I've had, and I had the worst trouble with audio that I've had in a long, long time. So it is not Chris's fault. It is 100% my fault. And I can't even explain what happened, but I had a lot of trouble. I had a lot of feedback and noise in the Skype call, so it was difficult to edit out, and there's some echo, and it's a bit of a mess. But hopefully I cleaned it up enough to make it decent to listen to. But you will hear some rather harsh, maybe cuts that hopefully you don't notice. I mean, normally on a podcast on this show, I talk to my guests for about an hour and 15, an hour and 20 minutes. And you get about an hour of it, and hopefully you never know the difference. Hopefully you never know that we've cut stuff out, move things around, maybe in the order that you're hearing them or whatever. And that's all the result of editing. This week, though, you'll go, man, that seemed a little harsh, but hopefully it just goes over your head, and hopefully you can just kind of move on and forget about it. That's really my hope. And if you can't, I'm sorry. We'll do better next time. I think I fixed the problem. It doesn't matter. That's all. I'm frustrated, but you don't have to be. So anyway, Chris Huskins, digital marketer, podcast guy. If you're interested in podcasting, learning more about it, how to plan, build, or grow your podcast, visit the links in the show notes. That will help you out. Chris gives out lots and lots of tips on all kinds of stuff around podcasts. So I can't recommend him enough. He's at Chris Huskins on Twitter and Instagram, and he's at Plan, Build, Grow on Facebook, and the links to all those are in the show notes, as well as his LinkedIn account. So make sure you go do that. But for now, this is a rather lengthy episode. So Chris Huskins and I talking everything from his early days of the Dell all the way up and through this season. So hope you enjoy it, and I will talk to you after the interview. We'd like to welcome to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, Chris Huskins. Chris is a podcast guy, a digital marketer, storyteller, speaker. He runs a couple of businesses. He's on Twitter at Chris Huskins. He's also on Instagram and Facebook. Chris, welcome to the show. We've talked several times kind of back and forth about podcasting and about a number of other things. And I'm a member of podtips.pro, which is a company and a kind of a podcasting thing that you run. We'll talk about that. So welcome to the show, and thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's rare that I get to mix sort of business or podcasting and my favorite football club, which I've been able to talk about for many, many years. So it's rare I get to come on and do a podcast about Southampton. So it's great to be here.
Oh, well, I'm excited to talk to you. And, you know, you live in Southampton, which is, I find it interesting because it seems like a lot of the places I go for podcast help or, audition help. There's Mike Murphy, who lives on the Isle of Wight and runs that thing on the Isle of Wight. There's you, and it seems like you're all down in Southampton. So I think I was drawn to the club before I ever did any kind of podcast, but it seems like I've chosen the right place.
Maybe. I mean, well, from where I'm stood, it always seems that things are in London and over where you guys are. So it's nice to hear that, and it's nice that things are going on down here. I mean, we had a few meetups, and there are podcasters about in remote areas, even like Southampton, that aren't the big. I mean, they're a big city, but it's not like London or Manchester. So it's great that there are people around in the local area, and it just shows how big podcasting has got.
Yeah, and I think it's also kind of done this, if people could see where I was podcasting from, I have gel pens to my right. I have coloring books to my left. I have towels all over the rest of everything to kind of make it so it doesn't sound like I'm in an echoey chamber. But that's the beauty of this, is it doesn't have to be the big fancy studio in the middle of London to make it work.
Exactly. And there are some amazing podcasts that have come from just doing it exactly like you and I are. And they went from a bedroom to a studio to having like 30 staff, and now they're making huge amounts of money from them. And it all starts, every single one starts in a room with someone's passion. And that's why I love them, I think. It just always comes from something somebody loves and loves to talk about. Yeah.
And that's something that I've learned from you, especially over the past, couple of months is just what that is. And it makes me, I don't know, less self-conscious about what I'm doing. And so I think, if nothing else, thank you for that. And I've learned a lot of other stuff from you as well. So.
Oh, that's kind. Thank you.
No, not at all. But we'll talk about podtips.pro and all that stuff in just a bit. But let's get your history with Southampton kind of out there, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Are you from the South Coast originally, or did you move down there? Or what was childhood like?
I'm born and bred Southampton. So I was actually born in the St. Mary hospital in St. Mary's, which it was the nicer end, because if you go around where the stadium is now, it does look a little rough. It's gone downhill. But I was born in a hospital near to where the stadium is now. I grew up in Southampton, and so it was just a natural thing for me that I followed my local team, and it was 25 years I think ago I went to my first game, and that was at the Dell, and it as soon as I felt that buzz, that warmth, I knew that I was going to be there for life.
Okay. And who took you to that first game?
It was my dad. So my dad was a season ticket at the Dell at the time. And he used to sit in what was called the Archers end, which is like it was the noisy end. It was like the Northern now. So it was noisy, it was singing, and I was only 6. And so, he gave his season ticket to someone else for that game and bought us tickets in what was the Milton Road end, which was like still a bit noisy, but he knew that it wouldn't be as sweary and as not hooligan-y. We were never really hooligan Southampton fans, were they? But it wasn't as bad as the other end. So he actually gave up a season ticket, bought 2 tickets, and took me to this game against, I think it was Bradford. And where are they now? So it was a long, long time ago.
Yeah, well, that is that's awesome that he took you, because it's not always, especially if it's like kind of like your thing. If you have your own ticket and you go to that, I know as a father too, like, it's something you do happily, is to give up kind of the things that you enjoy to even just change it up a little bit with your kids. But that's awesome that he would give up the ticket and put you in a slightly safer area. And actually, there's a guy on Twitter called the Archers Road End. He does a blog, and he's filled me in on the Archers End, and so I've enjoyed that little kind of whatever the stand is, and for me the Dell is all history. I never got to see it, so it's just all the stories, and you constantly hear the radio clips of Matt Letizia scoring the final goal there, and that whole thing. So it sounds like it was a magical place, and I'm glad you got to experience it at least.
It's quite a strange one, because obviously that if you go back in the history of Southampton, St Mary's, the name sort of comes from the church in Southampton. However, the Dell was almost the church really for Southampton. It's almost like the home ground. And I probably shouldn't admit this live on a podcast, but I've got parts of it still.
Ooh.
So there was a final game at the Dell, which was after the Premier League game. They did like a final game, and it's probably one of the best memories I have, because everyone was taking their seats. So there was a guy sort of 2 seats in front of me with a tool belt that he had smuggled into the game. And he was swapping seats with people and taking the backs of the seats off so you could take them home with you, because it was only going to be destroyed.
Right.
And so I've still got my seat. It was from the Archers Road in the end, so my dad let me go into the Archers Road eventually when I grew up a bit.
That's awesome.
And at one point they were singing "Stand Up If You Can't Sit Down," because obviously everyone had stolen their seats. And then it must have only got to like the 85th minute, at which point everyone got far too excited, and every single member of the crowd was on the pitch.
Yeah.
Run on the pitch, and they were taking parts of it, and it was fine. I think it was kind of not, the club weren't like take it, but they weren't saying don't take it.
Yeah.
So it seemed fine, and someone dug up a little bit of the centre circle for me, which is planted in my parents' garden.
Really?
Yeah, so we've got the seat and a bit of the centre circle from the original Dell. So
that's awesome.
I probably shouldn't admit that, but
I just wanted to be over there digging it up, trying to take a spot kick from it or anything. So, well, that's a pretty significant memory then that you have. And I mean, if you don't mind me asking, how old were you when the Dell was retired, I guess, or when that game kind of happened?
Oh my goodness, I can't even remember. To be fair, I can't remember what year it closed. I can't remember, to be honest. It was a great day though, and then I remember for weeks after going up to the site that St Mary's was being built on, and I've got photos. This is how long ago it was. They're actual photographs that were printed at a photograph shop of it being built.
Okay.
Because there was like a viewing platform, so I went up and took photos. So that's how long ago it was. I don't know how many years ago it was.
All right.
It was great. It was awesome.
I mean, aside from that, like, is your dad, or are you a season ticket holder currently, or no?
At the moment, no. I was a season ticket holder for a long time. So my dad was, and then he stopped, and then I carried it on. And I went into that whole thing where we went down, and we were season ticket holders while we were down, and going through those years. And then the last couple of years, my dad had to is working away, so he can't get to as many games.
Okay.
And I've been building these companies, so I couldn't get to as many games, but I get to as many as I can. I just think if you buy a season ticket, you've got to be able to get to enough that it's worth the cash. Otherwise, I'm just going and buying them one by one. But
right.
I really wish I could be. I'd love to be up there every single Saturday, but yeah, things get in the way, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're in charge of 3 companies. That'll get in the way of everything you can possibly want to do in life.
But I can honestly say I didn't miss watching a game, whether that be online or on telly.
Right.
All of last season, I can't bring myself to miss it. So I didn't miss a game all of last season in terms of watching it on telly or online. So yeah, it's still in my heart, very much ingrained, and I don't think that'll ever go away.
Right. I can tell you that I get very upset when anything is scheduled at like 8 a.m. on a Saturday because games kick off at 7 usually. And it's like, I'll be there at 9. I'm not going to get there before 9 because, and my wife's like, well, we got to do this. I'm like, no, like, this is important. And she's like, I can't believe you're actually going to let us walk out the door, me and both kids, and you're going to sit here. And yep, absolutely. And,
that's it. Well, it's 3:00 Saturday afternoons normally for us, or it used to be, especially.
Right.
And so that meant that whole of Saturdays were taken out, especially when we were going. It was like in the pub about as soon as it opened at 11 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And run across the park into the ground at about 10 to 3. Kickoffs at 3, you'd just about make it for kickoff, and then depending on the result, you'd either be celebrating with a couple of beers or drowning your sorrows with a couple of beers after. So yeah, I understand that conversation. When we were going, it used to be all day.
Yeah. I'm trying to convince, we just had one of the bigger bars where I live down the street, change ownership, and I'm trying to talk them into, once a month or so opening. We can't serve alcohol here in California before 6 a.m. It's against the law, but we're trying to get them to open for some of the 7 a.m. matches, or maybe whatever the late kickoff on Saturday is for you guys. Maybe open for that and see if we can get them to just do some sort of special thing, because they're not usually open that early, but they're contemplating it. And luckily my brother is a frequent patron and plays on their softball team and has friends there, so I think he's doing most of the talking for me, which is nice, because I don't like to get in there.
You know, right? It's who you know.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of different times scheduled. I mean, the last couple of seasons has been a bit odd. Like last season, didn't they start trying in what for us was Friday night games?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I've got to look at the fixture list, because I don't know if they're doing that this year, because I know it caused hell for some fans, because I think one of the Friday night games was away at Man United,
yes,
which is a good 5-hour trip from Southampton. And so to try and get there after work on a Friday, so you finish work at 5 and try and get up there by 7:45, if you had a ticket for that, it's not possible. No. And they were only doing it so that they got more money from Sky. And so I don't know if they're doing that this year. Hopefully not.
They do have some scheduled, and I know that they're, I think we play on a Monday at some point, which is, those games are hard for me because I'm at work. It's the middle of the day, but
yeah,
I try not to complain because I don't have to make the 5-hour drive to Manchester after, work. I just have to, schedule a meeting that doesn't exist so I can be in my office and have the game on.
Yeah. And you guys have way more access to the games on TV or online than we do.
Yeah.
Which I don't think, it seems so strange, because it is literally a few miles down the road from me that it's physically there. Yeah, it's really, and I have to use sites that probably aren't completely honest and legal to be able to watch that game, because it's not on Sky and it's not on any of the UK TV channels, it's a weird setup in this country, but thank goodness for your channels and channels from abroad, because it means that I can watch all the games if I can't get there.
Yeah. No, it's when I was in London on vacation, wanting to watch a game, and I had to go down to a pub. I couldn't watch it in the hotel at all. And the Manchester Derby was on, and I was trying to watch it. We had just gotten back from being out all day, and I'm flipping through all the channels, and I called the front desk, and no, we don't get it, but you can go next door and watch it. And I walked in, the pub was completely packed. Everybody's, watching it. The game ends, and about 10 minutes after it was gone, there was nobody in the pub at all. And it was like, well, that's how it goes, I guess.
Yeah, and it was the same for the World Cup recently. I went to watch one of the England games at the pub down the road, and the minute the final whistle went, it was before you couldn't get to the bar to get a drink. As soon as the final whistle went, it was cleared out. You could have helped yourself. It's funny the way that happens here.
Yeah. So, I mean, going back to kind of when you were, before we were drinking age, I guess.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite player kind of growing up, or, were you there during the era of Matt Letizia, or was there somebody else that kind of caught your eye as a child?
Yeah, so I was at the tail end of Letizia, but he was an incredible player. In fact, he was at my godparents' son is a chef at a restaurant just down the road, and he was there the other day, and my godparents' son was cooking him dinner, and he's still a lovely guy. You see him around Southampton still, and he's always stopped for a photo and a chat, and lovely guy. But the player that really stood out for me, and I think he's a bit of a cult hero now for Southampton, was Marian Pahars.
Uh-huh.
I think he's the Latvian international manager now. But back, he sort of joined in 1999, and he was just incredible. He linked up with James Beattie for like a few seasons, and they just took teams apart. They were incredible. And he was the one for me. And I think the reason why was, one, he was a great goal scorer. He was a little guy, get his head down and run. But the thing that I loved was that every time a goalkeeper got the ball at the other end, now people give them loads of room. He would sprint, even if he was back at by the opposite goalkeeper, he would sprint up there and just put loads of pressure on the keeper.
Huh.
And that made him a sort of a fan's favorite. He would just always have loads of energy, run down, really aggravate players. And he was awesome. So Marian Pahars, he was a bit of a cult hero.
It sounds a bit like Shane Long, only he could actually score.
He's exactly like Shane Long, except he could score. Yeah, you're right.
I hate to be mean to Shane Long, but it's become, there was a point in my life where I prided myself on not taking, the easy shot, but it's sometimes you just, you have to, and it makes sense at points, but I try not to be mean about it. But
I really like him, and I think that it's that work ethic that I do love. Mm-hmm. And I think that he will go back to scoring. He's just in one of those horrible, horrible droughts. But what I do feel is that we may have sold the wrong player, in that we got rid of Rodriguez, who has done nothing but score for where he's gone, and we kept Shane Long. Maybe it was his time. I don't know, but Pahars was the equivalent that he could score. I remember it was like his second ever game for Southampton, and this was back in '99. And he came on with like 12 minutes to go. I can't remember who it was against, but we were down and out that season. We were close to what we were last season. We were like 2 points into the relegation zone, only like 4 games to go. Everyone was writing us off, and he came on and scored within a few minutes, which got us a draw. And then after that, him and James Beattie just kept scoring together, kept working off each other. And I think we went on like a 4-game unbeaten run, which made us survive that year. Okay. So I think that's probably where the memory comes from as well. He's helped save us so many times.
Yeah. Nowadays, watching the team and just looking at them, is there anybody in recent memory that's kind of stood out to you? Is it Shane Long? Because for me, I have gravitated towards defenders. I really like Ryan Bertrand. I really enjoyed watching Font play. Van Dijk as well. But in terms of Shane Long and forwards, like that work ethic, I think that kind of industrious kind of nature as a baseball player, as an American, who grew up watching guys, and just really, I always found myself supporting the guy who was going to grind out the 17-year career, be an all-star once in his life and hit 275, but never be this big, giant star. I like those guys, which makes me like Shane Long a little bit, but also makes me make fun of him as well. For you in recent memory, who kind of stands out now that maybe you enjoy watching, even if it's not necessarily a Saints player?
Yeah, I mean, we've lost so many incredible players, haven't we? I mean, the world's most expensive player, Gareth Bale, was a Southampton player, and he's incredible to watch. But if you look at just in recent years, you look at Adam Lallana, for example, who's now at Liverpool. He was incredible when he played for us. He was just this amazing playmaker, and they had an amazing chant for him. I don't know do you know the one about Adam Lallana?
No, all the ones that I've heard about him are pretty obscene, and I won't mention them now.
So it was something like he plays on the left, he plays on the right. Adam Lallana makes Messi look, and it rhymes with. Oh, okay, yeah, I got that. It rhymes with right, and it makes him, and it was amazing because at that time you honestly could say he might go head to head with Messi at some point. And I don't know, his move to Liverpool, and he's suffered some injuries, so he's not quite back where he was, but when he played for Saints, he was incredible. And he was knocking in goals left, right, and centre. And the player you mentioned as well, Font, I really loved Font for a couple of reasons. He was an incredible defender. I thought that he was a bit of a Southampton man, like he lived and breathed it. And he has incredible tattoos on his arms, and he has quite skinny arms. So I think, and I have tattoos on my arms, and I have quite skinny arms, so he was repping it for the skinny guy having tattoos. So I quite liked that. But no, and even when he went to West Ham, I still follow him on Instagram, and I think he's a nice family guy, so I liked him.
Yeah, I found that following guys on Instagram is, there are a couple of fan pages like of Dusan Tadic that I still follow and it's going to keep me up to date with all of what's going on. And then you just but I now find myself like, where is the Saints news? I'm scrolling through. I have all of these other players who play for other places, and I'm the number of shirtless dudes on vacation in the summer. My wife's like, "What's up with your Instagram feed? What's going on?" And I'm like, "Well, these are all the guys from the football team that now are Cedric Soares is in an island or doing something in bright pink shorts, which is great."
He's allowed. He can do what he wants. He won the European Cup, didn't he? So he can do whatever he wants. He can wear whatever shade of shorts he likes as long as he comes back.
Yeah,
and plays
absolutely.
well next season.
The one thing about him, and then we'll move on. Have you seen the comparison of him smiling to Chandler from Friends in America? I don't know if you've seen it online, but they both have this kind of.
But I need to see that. That sounds amazing.
It's pretty spot on. It makes me laugh every time I see it. So I'll have to find it and send it to you.
Yeah, please do. That would be amazing.
All right. Well, but before we move on and talk about current Saints stuff, let's talk about what you have going on. You just launched last week PodTips.pro. Tell us a little bit about that for anybody that may be listening or interested or anything like that. Yeah,
sure. So PodTips.pro in its most basic form is a membership site for podcasters. But let me tell you why I started it, and it'll sort of ring true what it is that there's a lot of people podcasting just like yourself. There's hundreds of thousands of people doing it all over the world. And a lot of people are looking for help and support every day. They're Googling things, they're joining communities. And then some people are going that step further and paying for courses. And what you find is these courses are like anything from $500 to $3,000. And it's just a course. So you go in, you watch the videos, you might have a bit of chat in the comments under the videos, but whether it's like a couple of hours or 2 days of courses, that's it. So you've paid all this money and then it's over and the support stops. You've paid, so the chat stops. And then do you really take action on it? Does it really teach you? And I wanted to create something different from that. So I'm from a radio background. I was a radio presenter for years. I'm doing commercial radio all over the UK. And even then, even after doing it for 8 years, every single month we would get training. Someone would have listened into a part of a show and say, well, this worked well, this didn't work well for the audience. Do you think we could do it this way and try that next time? And that's what I wanted to do for podcasters. I wanted to have the course, but then give them the one-to-one support all the time that helps people to grow, because you can't learn this stuff overnight. And I think, what is this, episode 80-something, Matt? 81, yeah. So you all have been learning every single time you're doing it, right?
Uh-huh.
And you are constantly learning. Even I am. I've been doing this for years and years and years now. I was a presenter before it, and I still learn every time I do something. So if you take that learning, you highlight it with someone who's been doing it slightly longer, and you get that support constantly, then it's only going to get better at a much faster rate. And I hated this idea that people were paying thousands and thousands of dollars for something that didn't give them that support. And that's why I created PodTips.pro, because you get the course, but you also get one-to-ones on a monthly basis with myself or my team. There's monthly webinars every month where we get some of the biggest people in the business to come and talk about specific things in podcasting. There's discounts in there that are currently at I think the value of the discounts combined are over $500. So that would pay for PodTips.pro for 2-3 years. Mm-hmm. And then there's the community sort of mastermind in there as well. And just that combination of things, of community, training, and constant help, I think makes podcasts huge. And so that's why I created it, and that's what it is. And it launched last week. Yeah.
It was, I don't know, it's been fun to kind of see this whole thing kind of develop, excuse me, from a distance. I mean, I'm across the Atlantic Ocean and across the United States, but the first time we ever talked was about podcasting, and I had a one-to-one with you, and we kind of talked about the show, and you gave me a lot of tips, and I've cleaned up my social media kind of stuff from that. And so it's been, I've gotten a lot of help from you. And then now I'm lucky enough to be a member of podtips.pro. And so it's exciting to kind of be there. And one of the things that you have done recently is you started doing daily kind of short tips on IGTV, which, I've actually really enjoyed. I wasn't sure I was going to like IGTV, but it is just so easy to sit there, especially I think the content that you've been putting out is somewhere between 2.5 to 4.5 or so minutes. It's perfect. It's not a 27-minute long video on YouTube that I'm waiting for you to get to the one question I want. It's answering that short, quick tip. And then we move on, and it's fantastic. So, you single-handedly have kind of made me look at IGTV in a different way, because there's still, I think, a lot of people missing out on that stuff because they're so used to shooting video in the other format, in the landscape format.
Yeah.
So it's
well, that's an interesting one. It's great to hear. Thank you, because that's what it wants to do. I don't think that series, the Podcasting Tips Daily, will ever be something that someone listens to every single episode. If they do, amazing. They're probably getting most of my book for free. But it's to dip in and out. And the idea is, like you say, I've got a question about podcast hosting. Okay, well, I can listen to this episode. It's only going to be a couple of minutes of my time, because everyone's time's precious now, and they can watch or listen to it. And interesting you say about that sort of portrait filming, because I actually film it in both. So that's that Podcasting Tips Daily is available as a podcast, an Alexa skill, a portrait video for Instagram TV, and a landscape video for Facebook and LinkedIn. So it's I'm filming and recording in sort of 4 different ways at once when I do that, but just so that it's available to everyone.
Yeah. Kind of looking at Saints from last season now, for me, this was really the first real flirting with relegation, because I have only kind of been a fan since things were coming up and kind of were always on the rise, I guess. And so last year was tough. It was kind of my first experience, because we don't have relegation in the United States. So the Astros, my baseball team, have been bad for a very long time. The Dynamo have been up and down, but I've never had to worry about them, kind of disappearing off the radar in terms of TV coverage, because we talk about TV coverage for the Premier League teams being so great in the United States. Championship stuff, not as easy. It becomes much more expensive, and the times are just, quite frankly, less convenient because they play so many midweek games. But for you, what was last year like in terms of watching the team? And were you thinking we were going down, or did you kind of see this coming, or was it a surprise to you?
I kind of gone up and down with it. I mean, the first thing to say is that it wasn't new territory for me. Like, I think if you go back to just before, maybe it was just before you started watching Saints, but when we were in the Premier League the first stint, before we started going down and then coming back up, we were it was only Man United have done it better, but for 28 years we were in the top flight of English football, which was the Premier League for a long period of that. But before that, it was just called Division 1 before they sort of separated off and changed it to the Championship and that sort of thing. But we were in that top flight for 28 years, and only Man United have ever beaten us. So, which at the time meant we were sort of second in that. But for a long period of that time, and a long period from me watching them from like 6 to watching until we did actually go down, we were fighting for relegation almost every year. And it wasn't until sort of later in that we actually got like an FA Cup final, and we started finishing about 8th, that we sort of started thinking, we're a sort of a top of the table club rather than a bottom 6 club. So it wasn't new territory for me. So I wasn't as sort of petrified by it and upset by it, because I knew that's where we've been in the past. Mm-hmm. Whether or not I thought we'd go down, I did. I honestly, I can honestly hold my hands up and say, probably about 10 games left to go. About Christmas, I thought, that's it for us. And I'm going to get a shot for saying this, but there was almost a part of me that felt like we should have, and that we almost deserved to, because we've gone through so many seasons of letting our best players go. And that season, last season, at the beginning of the season, we didn't replace them with good enough players in some of those positions. We let the Lallanas, we let the Manes go, we let so many players go to Liverpool. And it almost felt like maybe the board needed to be taught a lesson. I'm so glad it didn't happen. I'm so glad we didn't go down, and it looks like we're replacing players with some stronger caliber now. But yeah, I thought we were going to, and a part of me thought maybe we should have, just to teach us a lesson. Bad? Is that bad to say?
No, I don't think you're alone in that. I think a lot of people were there with you. And a lot of people just looked at what the business the club has done over the past few years and not felt like it was good enough. You know, I've said this before, but I am not a very positive person, but I try very hard to make my experience with the club a positive one. And I try to look at the bright side, and I always tell myself that the board has a plan, and they are, they're doing what they think is best. And, sometimes it's just like, you can't do that all the time. Sometimes, no, the board has lost it a little bit, and they're making poor decisions, and that's okay. That doesn't make you a bad person for criticizing the board, and I had to learn that. And I think last year was a big learning curve for me in terms of that. The fact that I was podcasting kind of all the way through it was also difficult, because a lot of weeks it was just, can we get through this without crying? And can we find something in there to kind of give us the will to go forward with all of this,
I think sometimes we forget that, especially in UK football, especially Premier League football, that we're still a business as well. Mm-hmm. It's still a massive, football's a huge business, and there's so many disputes on so many other podcasts, so we won't get into it about how maybe it shouldn't be and it should just be a sport, but there's huge money in it, and it's always going to be a business. And I think at the beginning of last season, we went through that period where the club was sort of partially sold. Katarina Liebel was still there, keeping the memory of her father alive and keeping things going, but also wanted to get some of that money back. And there was just that feeling that actually maybe we just sold players to get money in and to draw, and we've reached we haven't got debt anymore. They cleared that debt from the training ground that they built and all those things. Uh-huh. And so at the beginning of this year, I think it felt like it was more about money than buying good players. And I think that's why a lot of people did turn on the board this time around. However, I think that they've come out of that, and I think that they've not been afraid to spend some of the money this year. And so I'm not on their back. I never was anti-board or anti-Les Reed or anything like that. I think that it was just the timing, and I am really glad that we survived, because we forget how difficult it is to come back up, and we forget the amount of money you lose from not having the Sky deal, and it's really difficult. And that's why so many teams from the Premier League that do go down again and have to go on a big journey like we did years ago. Yeah,
well, I mean, you see what how tough the championship is, and just how different it is when you look at, granted it was a preseason game, but our match against Derby County just last week, where those guys were very physical. I think had we gone down, I mean, Buffal's out on loan now anyway, but had we gone down, there's no chance Buffal survives a season in the championship. He's just not built for that. Tadic, I think, would be great. He would go down to the ground a lot, but I think he was, and this is where I will get in trouble for defending Tadic. I love him. And so, I think he's strong enough to be able to give it back a little bit. And I think in my head, I just chalked it up to him being from Serbia, and him, like, those guys are just a little bit tougher than, my soft middle American class self. And so, I would hate to. He takes his shirt off a lot, and the guy is ripped, isn't he? So, he definitely could hold his own. Yeah. It's a shame to see him go. It really is. Yeah. And it was, I don't know, watching him run onto the field the other night for Ajax in his first appearance for the club was like, it hurt a little bit, but yeah, it's good for him. It's the move he wanted. And you don't begrudge him that, because he played, there was never a time, for me at least, watching him, when he was looking for a move. Last year in the relegation battle, he really stepped up and played better than he had played kind of in 2 seasons. And so for that, I really am grateful, because he could have easily said, I have a World Cup coming up. I'm going to get a move. I don't want to get hurt. Watch me just refuse to warm up, or train hard or play hard. And he didn't do that. So a lot of respect. We've seen that from so many players, haven't we? We've seen that behavior come out of
so many players. A contract means nothing anymore. They refuse to play. They end up training with other parts of the team. I won't mention anyone, Van Dijk. And then we find ourselves in that really difficult position. But he didn't do that. He didn't leave halfway through a season. That's so important to me. I really don't like this sort of window in the middle of the season where players get to move around. I think if we abolish that, we'd get a lot more loyalty from players. And he didn't do that. He waited till the end. He got even better towards the end of it. And do you know what? I don't know why. I kept saying this, and my wife and my dad kept saying, why do you keep saying that? But it felt like at that end, where I think he ended up in his pants. The guy likes to get naked a lot, I know he does. But he ended up in his pants walking around, and it felt like he was saying goodbye. And I kept saying that, and they kept saying, why are you saying that? I was like, I don't know. I just got this feeling that he just played his way out of the season. He was amazing. He played really well. He fought, and that was his way of saying thank you for the last couple of years. And so I get upset when players leave, and there are some players that I still boo, which I shouldn't do when they come on for certain teams. But he will never be one of them, and he's one I'll keep following on Instagram and making sure he's doing all right.
Yeah, no. Going back to what you said about him kind of getting all the way down into nothing, and giving away. I mean, because he gave away his boots, he gave away his shorts, he gave away his shirt. He didn't. I don't even think he had socks on. I think it was just the underwear. Which for one thing, when I play, I wear like long compression shorts, like almost down to my knee. They're actually in many instances longer than the actual shorts, the team shorts that we wear. But like, I don't know how you play in what he plays in. I just think about sliding.
Yeah, proper some, didn't they? It was I didn't imagine they wore that. I wear similar to you, but they're not long, but they're like boxer shorts, but that our compression keeps, without being crude, everything in the right place.
Yeah.
I can't imagine playing in what he did, but there we go.
No, he's got less clothing on than Cedric on the beach, which is hard to do. But thinking back to that, it did seem like he was saying goodbye, and now, of course, it's easier, I think. And this is always like I'm a history teacher, so you're watching it happen in real time, and then as you reflect and things kind of play out, how much does that change kind of what I was seeing? And when I think about it now, how does where he's at now play on my memory of what I was seeing then? And so I find that I think it's really interesting. But in terms of this window now, we have several players out on loan. We have Boufal's out on loan, Classy's out on loan again, Carrillo is out on loan. We brought in some players, Armstrong, El Nussi, Gunn, Vestergaard. Do you think the team is turning a bit? Do you think we've realized that we kind of got lucky last year and that we're kind of addressing those issues, or do you think that the board is still kind of missing a piece or two? Or I guess just how are you feeling now going in as we approach the season?
Do you know what? I feel really positive, and I'm going to just ignore the Derby result because they've had a lot more preseason games and all that kind of thing. We could talk about that till we're blue in the face, but I feel a lot more confident in some of the players we've bought. I also feel way more confident in the manager. And I think that if we had started the season with the players we had, but we had someone like Hughes in who can get the best out of players that maybe aren't to the right standard, I think we would have been middle table and quite easily survived. I honestly do. And that's not to slag off Pellegrino or Pure before him. It's just to say that he gets the best out of players that aren't top level. And, I really believe that he would have done that again. So I feel like some of the players, and Tadic is a great example. Hughes got the best out of Tadic we had seen in a few years. Mm-hmm. And he was getting players to score. He was getting players to defend well. He changed it up to a way that was positive football. And so I have massive faith in a manager. And even if we hadn't brought some of these names in, I think we'd have been okay for survival. The people we've brought in have made me excited for doing what we've done in the last couple of years, even going back to pre-Pure when we were finishing 8th.
Right. I
mean, Yannick Vestergaard looks incredibly strong. I saw an amazing meme on the internet of I think it had like a picture of Vestergaard and a picture of Van Dijk, and it had like Van Dijk looking really miserable, and it said something like, when your ex is far better looking, when your ex's new fling is far better looking or something. It really made me laugh.
I have to jump in. I put that out there.
Did you? Was that yours?
That was mine. I'm very excited.
I shared it. I saw it and shared it. It really made me laugh.
Oh, thank you. That makes me feel good because I'm in a group chat, and this is exposing way too much of myself here. I'm 32. I'm almost 33. I'm in a group chat with a bunch of people who are much younger than me. And oftentimes I will come up with something and I'll Photoshop it and I'll put it in the group and be like, what about this if I write this? And they just go like, that's a dad joke. Nobody's going to like that. And then I'll slap something together in 2 seconds and I'll go and I'll put it in there as a joke. And they go, oh, you got to put that out there. Like that's, and I have no idea how the internet works. That like this is, it's official. I'm old, and that's okay. So they said,
it's
yeah,
okay. You're only a year ahead of me, and I made a living off of making dad jokes on radio, so it's okay. And do you know what? It's funny though, because the internet's a weird place, and we could talk about that for a few hours. But most people are just throwing as much to the wall as they can until it sticks. And that one thing that does stick makes them huge. And everyone forgets about all the bad jokes and the dad jokes they did before that and all the rubbish memes that they made over the last 3 years. It's a funny old world. But I love that. And I completely agreed with the sentiment that you were getting across. I think Yannick looks stronger. He looks like more level-headed. He seems to have settled in. I don't know if you've seen this. Southampton seems to have upped their social media game in the last couple of weeks, and they're just showing real behind-the-scenes stuff, and everyone looks really happy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was yesterday or the day before, they had Charlie Austin like behind the scenes, and he was literally filming, just going around the training session, and he was obviously taking the mick out of everyone.
Yeah.
And it just feels like there's this real positivity in the camp that we definitely didn't have at the beginning of last season.
No. There was a dourness hanging over the club at the beginning of last season, and whether it was from a hangover from Claude Puel, whether it was the Van Dijk thing, whether it was just Pellegrino's nature and kind of how he approached and just kind of had his laid backness. One of the guys that was on The Guardian, I think, kind of talked about him being like so zen and just kind of, go with the flow. And that probably makes his life very, very enjoyable, but it didn't make for a very enjoyable football season in terms of getting guys to get up and go. So,
no, I agree. And at that point, we needed someone to shake it up because Puel lost the fans. And that's the first manager I've seen in a long time that loses Saints fans. I've never seen the negativity in Southampton fans that we saw over the last year, maybe even two. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where it came from. It all of a sudden felt like, and I know loads of Southampton fans listen to this, so I'm going to get shot for saying this again, but it almost felt like we got to the point where we were just a load of moaning myrtles as opposed to positive, we can do this Saints fans, which is what I grew up on, Saints fans that were like, well, yeah, we're going to just get by the string of our teeth, but we were still singing we're the best team in the world every week on the stands. And we lost that last season, and you could see that in messages on forums, tweets, call-ins to Solent. You could hear it at the games as well. You could really hear it at the games. And Pellegrino needed to do something massive to shake that up. And I think you're right. His zen, his sort of laid-back approach, it didn't work. And maybe it'll work at this next place. You never know.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how he gets on at Leganés, and maybe he's taking Carrillo with him on loan at least. And I'm not sure what that says about us, both Boufal and Carrillo, or Boufal was at one point our record signing. Carrillo is our current record signing. Depending on the fees that go along with Vestergaard, maybe it will outweigh him eventually. But having those guys out on loan, whether it's, and you can throw Classy in there as well. And I've heard the argument made that the board has the black box kind of in terms of what they do with their scouting and things like that. I think Boufal was on the radar, but that was definitely also kind of influenced by Puel coming from the French league and having a player like that. Carrillo, very much a Pellegrino signing. Classy, it's easy to make the connection with Classy and Koeman because of the Dutch connection there. But you look at some of those players and they don't quite fit. They don't quite work. And whether every player, every manager has to have a few players on the squad that are his, that he wants, that are just the right type of person, and then somebody they can work with. And but and I think maybe with the market swing and things like that, so you have to pay what you have to pay for them. But it sucks to see our two kind of record signings sitting out there on loan at places where, and they haven't gone classy places. Celta Vigo and Leganés are not going to probably set the world alight this season. but hopefully I'm just hoping that the guys we have brought in, that El Nusi and Armstrong and things like that, can kind of fill in for them and take over.
I think there's a very specific way things are done at Southampton, and I think Puel lost that kind of way a little bit. We've got very defensive, and that's not the way Southampton play. There was this saying a lot when Katharina Lieber took over, and we got his name loses me now. He was a US hockey coach, came
Kruger.
over. Kruger, yeah. He came over, and there was this phrase, the Southampton way, and it was used a lot in marketing. It was used a lot, and we went away from that a bit. And I think that some of the players, Hughes has come in, he knew the Southampton way. He was a Southampton player before, so he was obviously going to get a fan's vote straight away. He knew how it worked, and I think he went in to shake up a few players, and Buffal was one of them, who was frustrated in himself because he couldn't perform at the level he wanted to. He's clearly a talented lad. Mm-hmm. He clearly knows that he can move the ball very fluidly, he can scare defenders, but he doesn't have that final touch, whether that's a pass, cross, or a shot. And so I think Mark Hughes really challenged him on it, really pushed him, and he kicked off, didn't he? And they had a big old falling out. Yeah. And if there's one person that you don't want to do that with, it's someone like Mark Hughes, who trained under, say, Alex Ferguson, who never took anything from his players. He's famously thrown a football boot at David Beckham. And so Mark Hughes learned from this absolute sort of really hard manager, and I think he'll be the same. So I think the two players that you mentioned there, Buffal's gone out for a different reason. Buffal's gone out because I don't think Mark Hughes wants him at the club.
Right. He
was training separately for a while as well, wasn't he? So I think that, and we just couldn't sell him, so a loan is a good way to save on wages. And I think Hughes, I saw it on the back of the Echo, so you have to guess whether it's truth or not with the Echo, but it was on the back of there saying that Hughes wasn't up for buying any more players until we've got rid of some of the others, and I think our wage bill was really, really high. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why he sent out people like Buffal. And Carrillo, I think, is probably, I don't know the details. I'm guessing he's got a buy clause in there so that Pellegrino could buy him on at the end of the year. I'm not sure. It does make sense though, doesn't it? It does sound like it's something that he'd want to move him on. We never saw what we needed from him, but to give him credit, he came in at the most difficult time to join a club ever. And there are very few players who can come in to the Premier League for the first time and suddenly perform at a time that we needed goals. And so I think it was a bit unfair. And I don't think we shipped him out because he's not good enough, or maybe he doesn't do the Southampton way. I just think that Pellegrino, he wanted to follow Pellegrino and hopefully go to a club where the pressure isn't as high. I don't know. I could be wrong. That's just my opinion.
No. I think that we needed to bring in somebody who was going to score goals immediately, and because of the way we were playing, I think that would have had to be somebody who could score goals and create them on their own, and that was never going to be Carrillo's thing. And just the method that we were going about playing the ball around, we weren't creating enough chances. We created more chances early on in the season, but they were falling to guys like Nathan Redmond, who was having trouble hitting the target. Mm-hmm. And then as time went on, we were creating fewer and fewer chances, and it was, he got tied to Pellegrino because they had played, or they'd played together before, been together before. That wasn't going to win him any favors because everybody wanted Pellegrino out at that point anyway. As soon as Pellegrino went, it didn't take very long for Carrillo to find his way to the bench and then eventually to the reserves. And fairness to him, he tried, he played, he always looked like he was trying. It just didn't really ever seem like the proper fit. No. And you would have, I think we would have been better served to go out and get a striker who was going to be able to do things on their own. Whether that's, you can't just always wish for guys, but Mane would have been a better striker, even though he's not necessarily a number 9. Yeah. He would have been a better striker for us in that moment because he can go out and cause things to happen on his own where we just weren't creating those things. I think, and that I think looking back on last season, maybe my opinion on that has changed because I think, once again, trying to see the positive last year, Carrillo coming in, I wanted him to work out. It just kind of didn't happen. So
yeah, I agree. And I think you're right. It was difficult for anyone coming in, not just because of the pressure, not just like Carrillo coming in from abroad, but also he wasn't getting any service, and no one was getting any service. You think like Gabbiadini, when he first came to us, knocked in goals straight away. He was getting service. I really felt sorry for him. He looked like one of the most deflated players at the end of last season, because the games he was getting, the time he was being given, he would be given like a first half to try and make an impact, but he got 0 deliveries to him. And then he'd get subbed off at half time or on 70 minutes, and he had nothing. And he's a player that will always score goals, but he needs to have someone brilliantly linking up, and we didn't do that. So I think it was a hard season for strikers last season. And maybe it would have been different if someone like Austin had stayed fit, because he can create them from nothing, or he's like Harry Kane was for England. He's just always in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, and one thing Charlie Austin does, in addition to making fantastic jokes and making fun of people, is scoring those goals. So, which is something Harry Kane can't say in terms of making jokes and making people laugh, because he just seems to be, whenever
it's not the brightest a spark plug in the engine, is he? That's the simplest.
No. He
doesn't come across that, but he seems to. Well, we're getting off topic, but he seems to be a good captain for England. So we'll see.
Yeah, it seems like one of those guys where you would everybody be making a bunch of jokes, and he would try it, and then you just got pat him on the shoulder and keep going, because
you just keep scoring goals, Harry.
Yeah. Whatever.
We've replaced one of the players with Elyounoussi, though, who is exciting me. He does seem really exciting. He only obviously got half a game against Derby, and I didn't see that, but he seems to be like somewhere in between Buffon and Mane, in that he can really frighten players. He can move the ball along, but he can also put a cross in perfectly, or he can hit the target. And so I'm really excited. I think they're calling it. I think his nickname's Moy, I've heard. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's right, but he's really exciting me. He really is.
Yeah, I am looking forward to watching him, and Armstrong looked really good. I paid the £5 to watch Derby, but Armstrong looked really good in that game. So, my one concern right now is, if we play that 3-4-3, do we have the holding midfielders or the guys in central midfield that can make that work? Because it looked last week like we lacked a little bit of control against Derby. Like we weren't able to kind of control the game without that extra midfielder in there to kind of help dictate play and break play up. So that's my one concern. I think Romeu is maybe slightly too defensive. Lamina, box to box guy, can get up and down, but can they dictate the play enough? And I'm not sure, but I hope that we can do that.
It's a tough one, isn't it? And I really like that shape. I think that we play so well with that shape. However, there are times, I don't know that the players we have, especially for central midfield, are for that. And Armstrong's by trade a central midfielder, isn't he? Where did he play against Derby?
He played in the front three.
Okay.
Or maybe no, that's not right. He played in central midfield with Lamina, I think.
See, I've been seeing rumours of, and I think it was on like a Liverpool forum or another Premier League or Tottenham or everything, talking about Lamina going there, and it was only from opposite fans. So I really hope someone like buying in Armstrong and central midfielders doesn't mean Lamina goes, because he is very exciting to watch. And I think what we need to do is free him up a bit. Yeah. Have a holding midfielder and a very defensive midfielder like Romeo, and give Lamina the freedom to move to that box to box, because when he does it and does it well, he's very exciting, and he can hit the ball from what seems like he's got the ball tangled in his feet, and suddenly he just pings this shot that you'd never have seen coming.
Right.
I think if we can free him up this season and let him play the game he wants to play, we're going to see a very different attack sort of moving forward from exactly box to box.
Yeah. Armstrong can play in the number 10 role, which isn't there in that 3-4-3. He can play out wide in the front three, but the front three that we had either Austin or Gabbiadini up front, and then Redmond and Elyounoussi were playing out wide. I think Armstrong went out wide at one point. But having that kind of fluidity to be able to move in and out and switch flanks, which Elyounoussi and Redmond did quite frequently during the match, that'll be good. And I think I look at Armstrong, and in my mind, I just see, like a younger Stephen Davis, a slightly more.
Me too.
And so I think that's
exactly
good.
How I think of it.
That's what's kind of what we need, because Davis did well for us. He's just gotten kind of ponderous and a little bit slow on the ball, and nothing against him. He was fantastic for so many years, and I still like watching him play, but it just didn't quite seem to have the pace last year to be able to make it tick, which was what we need. So, I don't know.
I completely agree. I said that to my wife. I said that he is the young Stephen Davis. I hope Davis stays with us and moves into like a coaching role or something, because he seems to have that head on him, that he's got that experience that some of the young people could really learn from. Armstrong's exciting though. I'm glad to hear he can play in those sorts of positions. I was watching the video on YouTube of their goal practice, shooting practice, and he just stepped up. His first one, stepped up, put it in the back of the net beautifully. So it's nice to see someone who can really hit the back of the net. But in that same video, someone who didn't score for quite a while. I think they were doing a thing where if you scored, you could go and sit down. And Redmond didn't. He went right to the end with Harrison Reed, who's obviously the young one of the group. But Redmond didn't. He kept missing the target again and again and again. And it didn't fill me back with confidence. I think he's a great player. I really like him. He's young, he's fast, he scares defence. But do you think he's going to hit the target this season? Can he step up and do it? Because I think this is his crunch time, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he's got to do it now. Him, James Ward-Prowse, Matt Target, they're all getting to that point where they have to do it now. You know, the I guess the promise of them doing it eventually is starting to get to the point where we can't rely on that anymore. And you know, one of those things is some guys, you know, on their Instagram stories, they have their messages turned off where you can't actually message them through that. And I always feel weird, you know, like if they do something really, really cool or awesome in the game and they put a story up and then you message them, like, is that okay? First of all, like if it's out there, sometimes you just say, hey, nice job. You don't expect a response for them to ever see it, but you just want to do it. But Redmond turned all that off because we getting so much abuse last year. And
that's a shame.
And I think that
anyone should get that.
Yeah. And so you look at that and you just go like, okay, like your confidence is gone. He was in LA training during the off season, and I watched a lot of those videos and on his Instagram and things like that. And he was working on a lot of things. It wasn't soccer specific. It wasn't football specific. He wasn't working on shooting or anything like that. He was just working on his body and things like that. So you just hope that he got a little bit of confidence from doing the things that I think he's good at, which is running, sprinting. You know, he's fit in that regard. So hopefully he came back with a little bit of renewed confidence and it carries over. I don't know if it will, especially when we talk about him, you know, missing the goals during training and things like that. So
it would be nice if we were at the point though where we didn't need him to score. And I think last season he had so much pressure on him because we needed goals from anywhere on the pitch. And so he's got the confidence to just have a shot from anywhere. And I think that probably got people on the wrong side of him because he was just shooting it, go sky high, and he was shooting when there were other chances on the table that probably would have been knocked in. It would be nice if we can get him to the point where he just is the player that runs like mad and really scares defences, but get him really good at knowing when to pass the ball off to someone like Charlie Austin or Gabbiadini or whoever that is who can bury it every single time. That, I think, would make him a great player. And I think that people have seen greatness in him. I think it was Pep Guardiola last season when he was at Man City kept just saying, you're a really, really great player. He came up to him at the end of the game, I think. I think I'm right in that. And he was just saying, you're a really, really great player. And told him, I think it was when Pellegrino was getting us to play really defensive. Right. And we held our own. And I think he went on rather controversially and said, you shouldn't be playing defensively. Go and play your game. You're a great player. And I think that's what they said he said. So people can see quality in him, even great managers like Pep. So,
well, I mean, I'm not going to say that Ed Redmond is anywhere near as dynamic as Raheem Sterling, who didn't have the greatest World Cup, but was fantastic for City last year. But he had those issues as well, where he struggled to hit the target, and you know, Guardiola has managed to turn that around, and he missed a lot of chances, but he created so many in that team. It was a part of so many chances that he scored a ton of goals, and you know was one of those players that I really enjoyed watching last year in Sterling. And that whole City team.
It's interesting to say you think he didn't have a good World Cup, and so many people have said that, but I actually watched him from a different point of view. I didn't want him to score goals. I wanted him to do exactly what he did. And I think that's where I'm coming from with Redmond, is that he just really wound up defences and he ran off the ball. And a lot of the goals that Harry Kane scored from those heads was just Sterling darted forward on those corners and really sort of confused defenders and pulled them away.
Right.
I'd love to see Redmond do it the same as Sterling did in the World Cup, because it would just free off the fact that normally when Austin's on the pitch, there's 3 defenders around him on every corner, and those sorts of things. And if he can do that, well, that's a good enough job for me.
Yeah. No, and I guess me saying that, I'm not discounting everything that Redmond did over the World Cup. It's just, that Sterling did over the World Cup. It was just the goals weren't there, and I think a lot of people were expecting him to do that. But like you said,
yeah, everyone said it though.
He did a lot of stuff off the ball that was very important to England even earning those corners or getting themselves into positions where they could score from set pieces. So, he's been pretty fantastic. We do have a listener question.
Yeah.
From Stephen Charles Brandt, who is the actual owner and host of the podcast I was on last night, the Yellow Card podcast. But he says, what's one player that you think you need to see improvement in this year? Would it be Redmond? Or what player in the squad do you think needs to improve from last year to this year to help us have a kind of successful season?
I think I would say Redmond, but we've talked about him a lot. So the other one I think is at crunch time is James Ward-Prowse. I'm a little bit upset. If Saints had a better season, I think he might have been in like the reserves to maybe get called up to the England squad, because he is the best set piece taker in the Premier League, and he's not the £50 million price tag. But I honestly think he's the best corner taker in the Premier League. I think that with a bit more, seeing a bit more of him, he'll be the best free kick taker in the Premier League. He can put that ball on a 10 cents piece. Is that a thing in the US? He can, if you say put it there, he will cross the ball and put it there. And that makes him incredible from both set pieces and free play. What we need to see more from him is I think a bit more confidence, a bit more, definitely upper body strength, and put the ball in for those crosses rather than shooting from outside the box and skying it. I think it's his crunch time now. He's got to a good age. He looks strong in the team. He needs to deliver every single week and do what we want him to do. And he'll have a huge price tag on him if he does do that this year.
Yeah. And I think he's going to have to find a place in the team, I'm not sure the 3-4-3 suits him. He played out wide for us last year. I'm not sure. And we talked about this a lot last week as to where he's going to fit in. And he's just got to make it his own, because now with Tadic gone too, I think Bertrand is the set piece taker for the most part, and I don't know, if Prowse can get on the field, he takes them, and it'll be great, because we know that we'll get a quality delivery almost all of the time, and you have to make those chances count as a Premier League team. Otherwise, you take yourself out of a lot of you lose out on a lot of opportunities to score. So,
and he can't just be on the field because he's good at set pieces. That's not enough. There's only 11 players on the field,
right.
10 outfield players. So it's not enough that he's a great set piece taker. And I think sometimes that's why he got chances last year, because we were in the position where, we need goals. Our best chance is to get them from set pieces. This season needs to be different for the positivity of the team. So you're right. He needs to find his place, and it's this season or never, I think. I hate to say that for someone who's so young, but
right.
He's had so much sort of buzz around him that it's now or never, I think, especially with Southampton.
Yeah. Any kind of last minute thoughts or final thoughts on the team as we kind of wrap it up? We're approaching the hour mark.
Are we really? I could talk for more.
Oh no, me too. I just have to edit it all.
Yeah. I just think that we should go in with real positivity, and a message to Saints fans who are listening: sing every single note. And if you go into a game on Saturday, like the first game of the season, or whenever it is, if you go in on a Saturday and watch a football match at St Mary's, you shouldn't be able to talk till Monday. And I honestly believe that at the Dell it was the same. And I mean, it sucks for me. I do podcasts and voiceovers, and so if I go to a Saints game, I have to book the next day off from doing voiceovers, because you should be singing your hearts out and really get behind the team and keep the board stuff. If it goes that way and we don't perform, keep the board stuff off the pitch. You don't want a West Ham from last year. Keep that off the pitch and just get behind the lads, because when we did that last season, when we got behind players like Tadic, they were different people, and I hope we do that this year.
I'm just going to follow that up. There were a couple of fans who are, I guess, the generation above me, and have been supporting the team for a long time. And they echoed that. They told me, if you learn one thing from your trip over here, it's that basically look me in the eye. I am not happy with how things are going, but you're never going to be able to tell that when I'm in the stands. As bad as the West Ham match was, and some of them said, I would rather leave than abuse the players. But I'm going to come, my letters to the board, or my, my sentiment to them I will get my point across, but it doesn't need to happen, in public all of the time. And I think that's a change. That's a different point of view from how a lot of, and I don't want to say it's not a younger generation, but it's definitely a change in how society functions. We are now much more likely to complain out loud on Twitter. It's the difference between sending a direct message to Delta or adding them in front of everybody so everybody can see it. That you've had a bad flight experience. There
were two things that my dad taught me. One we've learned was I wasn't allowed to sit in the swearing stand until I was old enough to swear. But the other one was that you never boo your football team. And I think that happened way too much last season, because you just don't boo the team. You get behind them. And we saw from Leicester a few seasons ago that a positive mental attitude can do anything, and it can even win you the Premier League when you haven't got the players to do it. And if we get behind the team, I know that they'll have a good season. Yeah,
absolutely. And I guess the only thing is the club has to give you the opportunity to express your frustration with them, without it having to take place on the pitch. So I think mistakes were made all around, and we can all kind of look at it and learn from it, move forward, and hopefully have, a really good season, and just have some excitement, have some fun, and actually kind of enjoy it, because that's why we're doing. That's why we're fans through thick and thin, but ultimately this should be a release for the fans. It shouldn't feel like a drain on everybody's mental toughness or whatever it is to go through this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it should be enjoyable, and it was. You go back years, even when we were in relegation battles, it was still enjoyable. We still sung our hearts out, and hopefully we can do that again this season. And I think we're in a much better place than we were at the beginning of last season.
Yeah, absolutely.
Forget the Derby result. Forget that. That didn't happen.
No, it's. If we go into Burnley and it turns out like that, then we can go like, oh no. But hopefully we'll be all right.
We will, I'm sure.
All right. So Chris, people can follow you on Twitter at Chris Huskins. I believe it's the same on Instagram.
That's right. Yeah.
I'll put links to all that stuff in the pod tips groups in the show notes. So people can go follow you, and anybody that's interested in any kind of aspect of podcasting, there are tons of people in there asking questions and having discussions on everything from how to record a podcast, types of podcasts, equipment to use. All that stuff. So all of that is available. And I've been doing this now for, a year and a half, almost 2 years. And if you count the stuff that I've done with the school, and I'm in there every day, and I learn from it every day. So thank you for that. And thanks for taking the time out of your busy week, in the heat to come and talk with me.
The pleasure's been all mine. Thank you so much.
That does it for this episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Special thanks to my guest, Chris Huskins. He's on Twitter and Instagram at Chris Huskins, and he's on Facebook at Plan Build Grow. Links to all those are in the show notes, along with his LinkedIn. Check him out if you're at all interested in maybe starting a podcast, or maybe you have one, or maybe you just don't know how to grow whatever it is you're doing. Check him out. He can help you. Also, Chris, I feel like I let you down a little bit with the audio. I'll do better next time. I apologize. You can find this show on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. We're at SFCDELL_IVERY on Instagram and Twitter. And we're at Facebook.com/SFC Dell Ivery. There is no underscore in the Facebook address. There's also an email address for the show, southamptondelivery@gmail.com. There are 2 L's in delivery. If you haven't gotten that through your head and you've been listening a while, I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, get in touch with us any way you want. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know what you maybe like to see changed, and maybe we'll do it. No promises, because I find I break those if I make them. If you haven't done so already, you can subscribe to this show on iTunes, Stitcher, Acast, Google Play, TuneIn Radio, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. If you have trouble with that, once again, let me know and I will help you out. Shout out to our partner, the Southampton page. Follow them on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook for all your Southampton news and needs. They are really getting it done, especially on the Instagram page. Our logo is designed by Matt Beeling of the We Are Southampton page on Instagram. For all your match day edits, polls, competitions, and more, be sure to follow the We Are Southampton page on Instagram. Matt designed a new logo for the show that will debut just ahead of the Burnley game. So thanks to Matt for doing that. All music for the show comes courtesy of the Free Music Archive at freemusicarchive.org. The intro song is Epic Song by Boxcat Games, and the end of show credits that you're listening to now is Aim is True by Poddington Bear. As always, I ask that if you're enjoying the show, please leave a review on iTunes. It really does help. And until next time, remember that together, we march on.